Hello, welcome to another episode of Navigating Vedant. Zui, you're here. So, before we start, I was thinking a lot about what to give the title for this video, and I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's write a title as our first mistake as a podcast, and on the thumbnail we'll say like, okay, and how we are going to correct it. Now, when I talk about our first mistake, now I will not say that our mistake was our opinions. I think that was correct. That was all correct. But I feel that reading the comments that we received there could be a chance that we may not provide the whole context when we talk with each other, and which is often a point that Vedant points out to us. Because when you say something about anything or give your opinion, I know your personality because we hang out so much. I exactly know the context behind what you're saying. So if you point something that is maybe bad, I know that you have actually already considered the good points, and the points that you haven't talked about are the points that you feel are good. So I don't have to ask you, oh, then, why don't you also praise? Because I know that you have already considered that. And that's why you are not talking about it. But obviously, the audience will not know that, the audience who are watching us. So I think that our first mistake is the context. We can clear it out a bit because a lot of comments that came in talked about, how every movie is propaganda. Because we pointed out that our main aim of the last video that we published was like movies are fiction, and the whole point is to enjoy them more than talk so vigorously about them on social media and fight with each other. But many can consider that, okay, why are we talking about Dhurandhar in that way, but then we haven't talked about other movies that came up, and then not talked about them as propaganda movies or movies that have propaganda. We actually didn't say that Dhurandhar is a propaganda movie. We said that it's a good movie that you enjoyed. I haven't watched it. You enjoyed, but it does have a subtle propaganda in it, and whatever that was pointed out. So my question then comes out as, do you think all movies are propaganda? And whatever your answer is, why do you think so? We'll start with Zoe because I know that you have to leave, and I insist that we record on a Saturday. That's my obsession of giving me enough time to, edit the video. So thank you for still showing up. I'll give you the chance, and then after you finish, you can leave, and then we will continue. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, the question was, is every film a propaganda? Yes, because every art form has to originally be propaganda because it's an ideology of the creator that is passed on. They're trying to show uh, something that they are actually passionate about or something that they have conceptualized through their art, which is like fine. And every art form in that sense is a propaganda of their ideas, which is okay. The problem lies, basically what we were trying to discuss in the last podcast and what we were trying to say when we were saying that there is a subtle propaganda in Dhurandhar and why it is problematic, or when when there is propaganda in other films, why it is problematic. So my opinion on that is that propaganda is fine, it's always going to be there, but what kind of propaganda is being passed on is the actual issue. So that was the context that we missed in the last video. What kind of propaganda are we talking about? So I think there are, of course, there are a lot of, we cannot always classify white and black, but I think there is a hate propaganda and there is positive or negative and positive propaganda that goes in films. A lot of people in the comments had mentioned, had talked about, they asked us, what about these films? Are those films
Yeah,
propaganda?
Rang De Basanti was one. I think Homebound came
Yes.
up, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So films like these, yes, they are propaganda films. But what are they trying to talk about? What is the propaganda that they are trying to tell us? So I think in films like Homebound, I very recently watched Homebound. I spoke to you guys. It's a very beautiful film. I found it beautiful. The propaganda in that film is that minorities in India face a lot of casteism, and no matter what post you are on, no matter how hard you try, you will always be recognized by the community that you belong to, and the people who have a sort of superiority complex or they think that their community is probably superior than some other community, they will always point your minority to you and make sure that you always stay in your limits, basically. So that is the kind of propaganda that the film has shown. Now, is this hatred? No. It is what we are talking, what the creators of Homebound are talking about, is how these people have a lot of struggle. And I mean, every poor person has a lot of struggle than probably a middle class or a richer person, right? All of us know that. But what makes us worse is when caste or your community is brought in, and only because of that you cannot have equal rights, and people will always demean you no matter how hard you try.
So,
So
can I put you on a spot just a bit?
yes,
So could you not also say that, okay, then it is propagating hate towards uh you know a higher caste? I mean, not every higher caste person is going to do casteism. Do you then think that, could be a counter argument for that?
you're right. Every higher caste person is not. So we can always say that not every person. That is an argument that goes with everything that we discuss, right? Not every person does that. But we also know that people who do that are wrong. We know that equality is the right thing. But this whole point of if one caste is higher or one caste is lower still exists, then we have to keep talking about equality. And even if not all people do that, if one person who does that sees that film and gets inspired and does not do that again, it's a win for them, right? So that is how I look at it, and that is how every problem, I think, has to be
Mhm.
dealt with, because not every person is always going to be an answer to, is always going to be a counter argument, like you said. So that film was is talking about equality as a propaganda. In Rang De Basandi, also the propaganda was revolution. You have to talk against the system. Again, like you said, not every system. It can happen, but I think what people don't understand is that when films like Dhurandhar, or when Dhurandhar, I think is still a bad example of what I'm trying to say. But there are
Yeah, because
films
we
which are,
we made it clear that Dhurandhar is not a propaganda film
yes,
because it has a lot of really good elements that a film should have, but it
right.
has like a small portion of it that may
Hmm.
be considered as good talking points towards the current government. And then, because I think one very prominent thing, maybe other things are subtle, but one very prominent thing is that I think there's a dialogue, right? The ye naya India hai,
Hmm.
घुस के मार. So this is like a word to word thing that the current government also echoes.
Hmm.
Now I have just spoken with a lot of people, and they are saying like, but is it wrong?
Hmm.
Like, what if India is really that right now? So is
Hmm.
it wrong to say that? So there is going to be ambiguity in things that are not concrete or not presented in a very factual basis, is still open for interpretation. So when we call that as maybe a propaganda that is promoting the current government, it, I think, then varies on the way we are thinking. And because there is no concrete proof, although the proof could be that, okay, terrorism activities have lowered down since BJP has come up, but then again you have to, there are a lot of things to consider over there as well. Or we still have had four big attacks, right? And not everyone will have the knowledge of
Hmm.
military uh, actions that we have taken. So it doesn't actually mean that when we are talking about this kind of propaganda, it is, we are concretely saying that this doesn't happen. What we're talking
Hmm.
about is it's promoting what the current government is echoing. Now if it's bad or good, that's again for open for interpretation, right? It's based upon what kind of a thinking you have.
Right. So
Mm.
I think in films, every time it happens that when a certain government is in power, sometimes films come out that are in favor of the government that is in power. That just happens. But as filmmakers, I think that it's a choice that you make when you are showing something. You make sure that there is no hatred being spewed in the film against a certain community that probably at a larger scale might not be at fault, but only because some individuals are shown at fault in the film, people tend to assume that all of them are like that. So it's, if
Mm.
it is if it is a positive message that you're trying to pass on, then it's okay for people to assume that, okay, let's all of us not be like that. But if it's a negative
Mm.
message, and if one certain community is being targeted, then it is unfair, because I think as creators you have that liberty. When you're trying to make a film, you have the liberty to show what you can say the same thing in three different ways, five different ways, but if you're choosing to do that, then people will come out and say that it's a propaganda film.
Yeah,
So
and that's why I think the best, what I consider the best directors or the best movies are where the director goes into this movie not to prove a point, but opens it for a conversation. And that's why
hmm,
where, the we talked about this scene of Manoj Bajpayee, right, yesterday, where in Family Man, where he's exploring the LGBTQ terminologies and he's very confused about it. And it could come as insulting for someone who feels as though these people of course deserve rights. But the thing is that there are two characters in that scene. One is trying to explain, who is completely convinced that LGBTQ rights should exist, and the other Manoj Bajpayee, who has no clue about it. It's a funny scene where Manoj Bajpayee is very confused about these terminologies, and he said, okay, but like, or do we call them they means plural, are they two people? But the thing is that the scene is not conveying that LGBTQ rights should exist or not. It's talking about a real phenomenon where some people are going to be confused or going to be against it, and some people are going to be very clear about this topic and going to be for it. So that's the basic difference that a director, that I consider a good director can, or is, or whatever the good writer is, where
hmm.
the scene does not convey something, but it's thrown out to open a conversation, something like that. Yeah.
True, and I think films like Chak De India or Rang De Basanti, they have done stuff like this. They have talked about the real issues, and they've made a whole. I mean, the entire film is about patriotism,
Yeah.
but is it actually putting hate towards a certain community? Not really. I mean, you cannot point out. They are trying to show that something is right and something is wrong, but whatever they're showing is wrong is actually wrong or illegal, or not done in in a certain way that is actually ethically right. So all of these things exactly exist in those films,
Mhm.
but they have not tried to spew hate, and that
That-
is my entire point,
yeah,
entire
that,
opinion towards what people are saying in the comments.
yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Are you going to stay, or is it?
I'll
Are you
stay
going
and
to
I'll leave
leave?
when I have to.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So, if you look at the definition of propaganda, it's misrepresentation of information that benefits something. So information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a particular cause, doctrine, of point of view. Like, this is the basic definition that comes up when you search it on Google, which is what Joey talked about, right? So every movie will have that bias, whether it is about women rights, or whether it is about how religion kind of is necessary to maintain morality. Now every director will have that point of view and will try to maybe express it in the form of art. And what we are trying to do, right, we clearly consider that there should be more open dialogue about things, so that's why we are using this platform to voice out our opinions. And we will have that bias. Our bias will always be about lean, or our bias will lean towards logical thinking or rational thinking, or we will lean towards more equality, something like that. So that's our own bias. So in that sense, what the comments were, I think the comments that I actually replied to, which I felt that were worthy of replying, did talk about that. So yeah, and now I'll come to Vedan. What's your whole point of view about all this?
So, like when you mentioned to me yesterday that, when I asked you what are we going to talk about tomorrow, and you said that let's talk about whether all movies are propaganda, because a lot of the comments mentioned, movies that we did not talk about. And when you said that, I actually thought that, okay, maybe all movies are propaganda, because I was looking at it from that one dimensional aspect, that the movies that were mentioned, like Rang De Basanti, Heather, Dhurandhar,
Yeah.
Article 15, or whatever, all of those movies, yeah, they are propaganda. But when I went home and when today morning I was thinking about it, I was reading articles, I even asked ChatGPT that whether all movies are propaganda. I instantly thought that, hey, I like Wes Anderson's movies. Was the Grand Budapest Hotel a propaganda movie? If all movies are propaganda, what propaganda was there? So then I started thinking about that. Not all movies are propaganda. Like, would you call Jab We Met a propaganda movie? Or, would you call a sci fi movie like Predestination a propaganda movie? So, I mean, you could argue that it is propaganda in the sense that they try to portray love that doesn't actually exist in the real world. But does that actually bother us, or does that actually affect the community in any way? So I was thinking from the lens that uh, there are a lot of different genres of movies that we can talk about which do not fall in the propaganda genre. But the movies that were specifically mentioned in the comments, or something like Durandar that we talked about, maybe we try to analyze it from a different lens, or or try to categorize it in a different level. So as you said, that if a director, or if the movie is presented in a way that it is open for conversations, it makes you think, that it makes you question, hey, is this right? Is this wrong? It makes you go home and research about it. Then you could say that maybe not that much of propaganda. Whereas if it is a movie that actually overwhelms you so much with patriotism, or if it glorifies the state or the army or the military, then maybe you could call it a very clear propaganda, or a biased movie that does not give you the space to think about whether what they've shown is wrong, or it rather tries to convince you that, hey, this is the way that things go, because it shows a very one-sided view. And this is not just about Durandar, or this is not about right or left. Movies like that exist across the political both sides. We have talked about in our earlier episodes, when we talked about the Film Certification Board of India. We talked about how movies during the emergency period were also banned, and right now, a lot of the movies that probably go against the right wing ideology maybe do not get they receive a lot of criticism and stuff like that. So this has happened throughout government. So this is not about being on the left side of things or the right side of things. I think this is more about, if you watch a movie, because every director comes, as you talked about earlier, like every director comes with their own perspective, they have their own experiences, they have their own way that they want to show things to the audience. So there will always be some sort of bias or propaganda to it, because they try to portray things from their own point of view. And we have talked about how movies actually influence more than people claim they do. Because if you repeatedly show something, like some directors have a particular line of work that they make movies in, like Uri, or like Article 15, or like the Kerala files, or the Kashmir files, stuff like that. So if you repeatedly try to hammer the audience with one particular message, then that may be considered as propaganda, because that is the director's own ideology that they are trying to show in through their movies, and maybe try to influence the audience by it. And the fact that this happens in Bollywood is it happens a lot in Bollywood, because Bollywood mixes nationalism, entertainment, item songs. It like all this is not biased towards Bollywood. A lot of movies all around the world do it, but Bollywood does it a lot. So it often confuses the audience. So I think a simple rule that people can do is, like, does this movie actually uh, is it trying to make me feel something, or is it actually trying to make me believe in something? And then there are, of course, certain questions that you can ask yourself after you watch a movie, that is some particular person in power, or some celebrity, or some sports person, whoever it is someone trying to benefit from this movie? Were they shown in a good light? Is the movie glorifying something particularly? Are they trying to mislead the audience by omitting certain facts and only showing certain reality? Are they, trying to hide some uncomfortable things that they do not want the audience to think about? Or maybe why this movie was made at this particular time? Is it because something big is coming up on the horizon? Because we have seen a lot of movies that do come out as this time. And then another question is that are the oppositions, like not the opposition, the opposite parties or the opposite sides' viewpoints are treated equally, or are they treated rationally and stuff like that? So if you answer these questions, and if the answer is yes for a lot of these questions, then then you can probably arrive at your own conclusion whether a movie was a propaganda or not. Like you talked about Rang De Basanti, there is Swadesh, there is even Lagan. Those are propaganda, but they are not trying to convince you of something, but some movies actually try to convince you. So that is how we could categorize movies going forward and label them so that it is easier for us to address those or talk about those.
Yeah, and I think the point that you said, like, no, is the Grand Budapest Hotel a propaganda? And I think there's a clear distinction between the specific meaning of propaganda and how we use it in our natural conversations. So if you go by the definition of it, it's misrepresentation or misleading information, right? And fundamentally, if you consider movies, what are movies? Movies are misrepresentation of reality. Fundamentally, it's that because it's not real. It's a recreation that is still not, even if it is to the point 100% exactly what happened, it's still not real because it's not an actual, an actual camera that was pointed towards that real scene and that has been captured. It's still recreated. So it's fundamentally not real and misleading as well. And misleading, again, does not mean that it is trying to spew hatred or something like that. But it's still misleading because it feels real, but it's not real. And that's why documentaries come in, right? Where
Yeah.
if you
Yes.
are watching a very good documentary and they're talking about, okay, like, I watched the PDD documentary where obviously there were a lot of accusations flowing around, where they showed that these are accusations, and then they talked about how he was aggressive towards his female partners. There was actually a footage from a hotel CCTV where he pulled the hair of his partner at that time and bashed her on the floor, hit her, took her bags, and went to the room. Now, that is not recreation. That you can't say that is false or that is misleading. That is a real footage taken from CCTV that has captured reality. So
Yeah.
that's why documentaries are separated from movies. Some documentaries are going to be really bad, where nothing is going to be real, but it's going to be recreated. So you have to take it that way. Again, you have to differentiate in that way. So, yeah, you
And
want to say something? Yeah.
just building on your point, you can take a movie like Sanju, for example, which was based on Sanjay Dutt. So a lot of things about his life were shown, but a lot of the things were omitted, like his marriages, or like, he does not have a good relationship with his, I think, his sisters, or about his
Mm.
affairs in Bollywood, and even the part about his, the entire fiasco that got him into jail, stuff like that. So when the director, I think it was Rajkumar Hirani, he was asked about it, he said that you cannot show everything in a 2.5 hour movie. You have to pick out the points that you can show to the audience, and that just builds on your point that movies will not show the whole truth, or will not show everything, and even if they do, they will always try to sensationalize it, or try to make it for entertainment purposes, for the audiences to love. Because as you said, documentaries will get boring maybe for audiences, but a movie like this will not. So yeah, I think it just tries to build upon those points. Even MS Dhoni's movie, or movies that are actually documentaries but are not actually, I mean, based on someone, but
Yeah,
they're not documentaries.
yeah,
They fall on a very gray area
yes,
where,
yes.
like Dhurandhar, like it is fiction, but it is also based on true events. So you cannot criticize it because the director has a loophole where he can say that, hey, but it is fiction, but it's also based on true events. So yeah,
And my second point was like how we use propaganda in our natural conversations. And that's where your point comes in, where propaganda is often tied up with political propaganda. So that's
yeah,
why if someone says this is a propaganda movie, then it is instantly talked about in within the context of politics and what it is promoting. And that's where I think that's where a lot of confusion takes place when a movie like Durandar comes up,
yeah,
and then there's a backlash from some one side, there's support from one side, it becomes political, it becomes about history, it becomes about the current events, and then obviously it becomes about, and then people who follow particular ideology or particular party, then they drop in and then they talk about a lot of stuff, where then the point that we are then trying to make goes off, where what we said in the last episode as well, like movies are fundamentally fake or like not real. So you have to take them as entertainment and then leave. And then if you're interested, then you have to go home and read about them. So I agree to the point that, yeah, not all movies are going to be clear cut propaganda in the natural language thing, but there's still going to be propaganda if you go by the definitions of what a movie is and what a propaganda is. And that's where the good director thing also comes in. You mentioned like the Great Budapest Hotel, right? I am sure that a movie critique or film critic will find something and say that like this scene portrays this is this thing, and it could be bad, it could be good, whatever it is. But movie lovers like us may not realize that, and we will still appreciate the and good directors will make sure that the audience is not, like you said, forced upon thinking something or
yeah.
change their mind. Although sometimes, again, movies have been released to change people's mind for the good as well. So for example, obviously during the freedom fight, if a short movie, like obviously the technology didn't exist at that time for movies like this, but short movies or clips they come up and like they are shown how we can overcome the power, then that's a good propaganda movie, right? Because it's then aiming towards the freedom of people, freedom of Indians, and then someone from the British side would consider this as something really bad for them, and they will say that this is a propaganda movie that is promoting war, which is going to have a lot of you guys killed. So context matters when
Yeah.
that movie is published, in what timeline, what it is talking about. So that's all matters. And it's really complicated if you dive really deep into it. And a lot of people don't have time to dive deep. So that's why the message is take it as as an entertainment thing. Like don't
Yeah.
really, or if you want to go really deep, then you have to go really deep into it to understand what kind of ideology or like what they are trying to promote, or what they are not trying to promote, but it's coming off that way. And that is also a very real thing where the intention might not be to convey something, but it could come out in that way, perhaps due to incompetency, or perhaps due to not thinking from that perspective as what it might come off as. So it could be that. So yeah, but
So yeah, I think like,
yeah,
maybe uh just to sum it up, maybe like, loving your country, it is not propaganda, or having political
yeah,
discussions is not propaganda, or having your own beliefs also is not propaganda. But when you try to impose those on someone without taking into consideration the other side, or without any sort of critical thinking into your movies, then that could be called as propaganda. So
yeah.
in that sense, you could argue that, hey, this movie is propaganda, maybe this movie is not propaganda, but all movies have influence, as we have said. And so the problem is not about this. Maybe the problem is actually not questioning, or not talking about what we watch and labeling that as propaganda. Like,
Mhm.
if you label this as propaganda, if you cannot talk about it, if you cannot discuss this, why this is this way and why it is that way, then that is the actual problem that we have as a society. And that is something that needs to go away, because you need to
Yeah.
be able to have these discussions. Like, most of our comments, we do not address them as, like, maybe this is not, we are not mocking them or we are not making fun of them, because they are right in their own way, or they are right from their point of view, from which they view things. But having a rational discussion is the important
Yeah.
thing here, without ridiculing each other's beliefs, or without trying to make fun, or
Mhm.
without
Mhm.
trying to label each other uh, anything
Yeah.
that you think of.
Yeah, that's it. But also, I found so funny because this was our first experience, and obviously, we never expected that we will receive such kind of comments. Although there was like we talked about the legitimate points that they made, but obviously there was a negative aspect of it that I wish that no one would have to go through, or no one should be doing that, is name calling. And we have been called by Sanjay Kumar dash FB5XZ woke babies. This is the fun part. Don't take it really seriously. But and I think there was like this one more guy who said that you are a perfect example of weak men. Like good times create weak men. You're a really good example. Then there was another one who said we are real hypocrites. Then there was another one who said you are ignorant. And then the
Oh,
last one,
also mention the term that was used a lot of time.
yeah, I'll come to that. Yeah, Librandus. So, people who might not have a context. So these are basically terminologies used for someone who may be left ideology person, and I get it, and I get it. I think we know how internet works. So on both sides, there are terms and these labels that are put, that are called every time there's a discussion. There's always going to be this, which I don't want. I think this ruins the discussion. This ruins anyone who is trying to make a legitimate point. And I'm not saying everyone tries to make a legitimate point. Obviously, there are people who, and you talked about in the Smriti Mandana video as well, like, people now have an incentive to get as much engagement as possible on Twitter. And that's why perhaps it's not going to be a legitimate point, but it's just going to be a rage bait where people are going to just comment, being really angry, and those are not nice people. But I'm talking about someone who's trying to legitimately put their point forward, whether you consider them as a left ideology person, right ideology person. I don't really believe in these labels also. Like, I don't believe I am a left person or you are a right person. I just believe that many people will have different opinions on different topics. I might be conservative on some topics. You might be progressive in some topics, and it can come to sports as well. I might be conservative and say that Test cricket is the real cricket, whereas someone who has a progressive mind on this topic might say no, but we need T20I cricket and franchise cricket for the future of the sport. Now, would you call me a right winger of cricket? I don't know. So, yeah, that was it. And I think the improvement point is just that I think what you have mentioned a lot of times in our off the record conversation, that I think a lot of people may not have the context about our own personality and the way we think. So I think every time we are trying to communicate something, context is really important. And perhaps we may feel as though this is a very common thing to say, and why would someone think that we haven't considered the good part of something, or if we are criticizing the government, why someone thinks that we are directly talking about the opposition, or we favor the opposition. Because anyways, we don't talk a lot about politics, but in any sense, if we talk about media and information and how it works, how it shapes our lives, but in any sense, we might have to give that context. We might have to show people that yes, we have considered this, but obviously it may not be possible all the time. So the onus is not just on us, of course. But yeah, that's something that maybe we can improve. Any last words from you?
Yeah, I think I can now that I mean I'm assuming that the recording is over now, and now we can go back to playing some American propaganda where
Yeah.
you will be playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and
Yeah.
I'll be playing Far Cry 5. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's get to that now.
All right. So, all right. If you enjoyed this episode, do subscribe and do tell us if you feel something that where we need to improve, we went wrong, or if whatever your opinion is, just don't resent to name calling or whatever your legitimate criticism is, you can definitely post it in the comments. And all right, we will meet until next time.